This is Chapter 5, Loops, Programming Exercise 2, Repeat Additions. So this exercise is pretty simple. All we have to do is generate 10 random addition questions for two integers between 1 and 15. So we're just going to generate two numbers. Each number will be 1 to 15, and we're going to ask the user to add these numbers 10 times. Then we're going to display the correct count and the test time. Test time meaning how long it took the user to answer the question. And how we're going to do this is basically we're going to loop this, right? We're going to run this through a loop. We're going to display the count, which is question 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10, and the question, where x and y is the randomly generated number between 1 and 15. So x could be one number between 1 and 15, and y is one number between 1 and 15. And right before we start the loop to ask the user the question to answer, we're going to start the timer to count down how long the user took from when it starts all the way to when it ends. All right, and we're going to do this inside a loop 10 times. And after we're done with that, we're going to display the results. We're going to display it where the first one will be the correct number of answers out of the 10 questions, if not more or less, depending on what we're going to do. And the time took to solve it, which y representing when the user finished taking the test, and subtracted by when they started taking the test. So let's go into our coding exercise. Let's go into our IDE. For me, it'll be Intellij, and start this. Now, what I want to do first is to figure out, what kind of variables am I going to use, right? What kind of variables am I going to use to or do I need to create this exercise? So I know I'm going to have one variable being the user's answer. All right, so this is going to be the variable that stores the user answer. When I ask user enter, so if I ask x plus y equals whatever results, well, that's going to be stored into this variable. All right, now I am also going to need to generate two random numbers between 1 and 15 and be able to store it into that variable so I could display and ask the user. So let's call that, should I call it x and y? Let's just call it x and y for now. All right, and all of this is going to happen inside a loop, and this loop is going to keep asking the user's question over and over again for 10 times. Right, that's what this exercise wants. So in this case, let me create a for loop, because I feel like a for loop will work well for this exercise. A for loop allows us to specifically state where I want to start, in this case instead of 0, maybe 1, where I want to end, which will be 10, so I want it to run 10 times, and increment this loop by 1, so it could run specifically 10 times each, for a total of 10 times. And in this for loop is where I specify, right, inside these curly braces is where the scope of the for loop is where all the code is going to run for this loop. So the first thing I want to ask inside this code will basically be the x and the y. So why don't I generate the x and the y? I want to ask them, hey, what is x plus y? What is x plus y? And And what does it equal? Please let me know, and I'm going to store that inside this right here. All right. Now for x, well, x is going to be a random number that we generate between 1 and 15. Math. Which is going to be times 16, which is basically any number between, actually, it should be times 15 plus 1. So basically what we have right here is going to multiply the result of whatever it's randomly generate times 15. So it's going to be any number between 0 to 14 plus 1. So if it's a 0, it'll become 1. If it's a 14, it'll become 15. So now we are going to get a number between 1 to 15. Of course, we're going to do that for y too. All right, now that we have x and y, why don't we take a look? We're going to run this. We're going to compile it and see how that looks. So there we go. Now we have something like 12 and 11. So it doesn't really matter what we put for now because I'm not really checking that. I'm just storing whatever I input into this variable right here and not really doing anything with it. And right now, this is going to generate random numbers 10 times, as you can see, right? So let me just calculate. Let me just count just to make sure it runs 10 times. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Perfect. Now, another thing I want to do is actually display the count. I want to say, hey, this is question 1, 2, all the way to 10. So what I could do is simply do something like this right here. So I say if I is less than 10, then I could just simply display, it'll be, let's do something like this. 0.0 plus I plus and a little bit of space. Actually, yeah. Else, and this will just simply be, wait, I and a little space. All right, so let's take a look. So what this is, if else, not me, ooh, that does not look like what I wanted to do. I meant to put it like right here. So this just display what the current question is. So that's question 1, right? Question 1, question 2, question 3, as you can see right here, and question 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Perfect. So that's exactly how I want to display it. So now we know which questions we're on. All right. So now that we got all that, the next thing I want to do is basically be able to check, hey, is the user's input correct? So we could just do something like this. Add another variable. Let's say correct. Let's be more specific. Correct input, correct answers. And let's set that to 0 as a default because we're going to increment that in the for loop. So simply I say, hey, if, well, let me see if I could do something like this here. If user input basically equals to x plus y, put that there, that goes there. Then we'll just increment the correct answers by 1. All right. right, so hopefully this makes sense, right? So simply, I don't even have to put this here. This is just put everything in one line, but let's not cause any unnecessary confusion. Okay. Okay, so what happened, what's going on here is basically we're starting from here, right? We create all our variables that we need. Then we enter a for loop. The for loop starts at 1 and goes all the way to 10. And it does the calculation here. It does the runs through all these statements here. And each time you finish running statements afterward, increment the I plus by 1. So now this I becomes 2. It becomes 2 and it does a check. Hey, is 2 less than or equal to 10? If it's not, then it'll continue the for loop. But if it is, say now it increments all the way to 11, then it'll jump out of the for loop. It'll jump out of this scope, which is within from here to here, right? Out of the scope, and it'll continue and run code out of it, right? But if this logic right here is still true, it'll continue running these statement within the for loop. Now within the for loop, I have a variable that I already created on top called x and y. X is the left hand operand right here, and y is the right hand operand, well not operand, but the number, the integer that we're adding. And I'm randomly generating a number using the math class random method to generate a number between 1 to 15. And I'm doing this by multiplying it by 15, which will generate me a number between 0 to 14, and I add a 1 to it. By adding any number between 0 to 14, I now get any number between 1 to 15. And I'm doing this also for the y, for the y variable. That way I get x and y to be a random number between 1 to 15. Then I'm going to do a little check. Now this check here simply is for is to show what question number I am currently on. And the question number depends on the for loop, right? Because for each loop it runs, I'm also displaying a question. So if it runs on the first loop, it'll display question 1, answer this, what is x plus y? Now the thing is, I want to display it nicely. So all the way at question 10, it'll display, instead of the 0 here, it'll ignore that 0, which I could simply do something like this. Actually, I'll just remove that, right? And display the 10 itself, all right? Right, so just display the 10. So I'm on question 10. Once I'm done, it'll display what it needs to display, which will be outside the for loop. All right, so hopefully that part makes sense. And then in here, I just do a check. I want to calculate. I want to make sure that each time the user is answering the question, they're answering it correctly. And for each correct answer, I want to keep track of it. I want to have a record of it. All right, so that's what this does right here. I'm just doing a simple check. Hey, is the user answer that they input from the console, is it correct? Does it actually equal to x plus y? Well, if it is, correct answer plus plus, and that's all I want to do. Now, the thing I want to do is actually change this. I don't want it to just be any simple number. I want to be a number that I could control from the top of the program, which is not, and which I'm going to call it number of questions. I'm gonna set that to 10, and I'm gonna make sure it's final. Final meaning that I can't change it once I have set it. So I'm gonna put that here. All right, so now if I ever want to change how many questions I want to ask the user, I just go up here instead of looking at through this for loop. So just look right here. All right, let's do 1 question. Let's do 5 questions or 10 questions, right? So I could just control it from here, and it can't be changed after it has been set from the top. All right. So now that I've done all of that, let's do the next part. All right, and the next part simply says to display. Okay, so let's display. Let's say System.print. You've answered X out of 10, right? Correct answers out of number of questions, right? Correctly. So another good thing about changing of creating a variable right here is that if I want to change anything, I just change it up here. I don't have to change it right here where I put the 10 before, and I don't have to also put it right here where I have to now check, did I ask 5 question, 10 question, 11 question? Well, it doesn't matter because I already set the variable here and I know that that is the correct amount of questions that I asked inside this for loop. And you can't change it afterward to something else because or else you're going to get an error thanks to this final keyword right here, which means cannot change. Whatever you did with this variable, it is final and it will stay as it is. So that's another good reason to change it up there and make it final. All right, so let's try to solve this, and I'll try to solve it as quickly as I can. All right, so let's see, 14, 6, and the rest, I'm assuming I got 5 correct. All right, perfect. I got 5 correct. It is displaying correctly, it is counting correctly, and it is showing my final results correctly, which is exactly what I want. And lastly, it is to track how long all this took. Now I want to start this when the for loop start and end this when it gets out of the for loop. All right, so how do I do this? Well, once again, I'm going to have to create another to use another class, and this class is the system class with a variable, with a method called current time in millisecond that returns a long data type. So what I'm going to do is create a variable called long and the variable name will be start time. All right, and then I'm going to create another variable right here called long, and I'm going to call it end time equals System.currentTime in milliseconds. So what this does, it instantly starts tracking the current time. Well, it doesn't start to track. What I meant to say is it grabs the current time. Right now, the exact current time in millisecond, whatever it may be, right? And it stores into this variable called start time. And then I calculate the end time. I track the end time right after the for loop finish, right? The second the for loop finish, grab a hold of the current time right now. So that way I could use it to solve for how long it took me to answer all 10 questions. Time took to solve 10, no, not 10, number of questions, right? If I want to change it, 10 number of questions, and simply just do end time minus start time. And this is going to display in milliseconds. So I don't want milliseconds, I want it to be in seconds. So I'm going to divide the whole thing by 1,000 to convert from milliseconds to seconds. All right, and I really don't want to answer 10 questions. I just want to do something small. So let's say 3. And by doing that, I don't have to change here, here, and here. I just have to put 3 there, and the whole thing will now say answer 3 questions, and it will display the result out of 3. So 14 plus 5, I believe that is 19. 11 plus 6, that is 17. And 11 plus 23, oh, that's too hard. That is 4. and I click enter. So bam, now I say, oh, you've answered 2 out of 3 questions correctly. Time took you to solve 3, I should say solve 3 questions. All right, solve 3 questions is 17 seconds. So it took me that long. All right, now if I do want to show a little bit of milliseconds, let's see if do that. So once again, really want to repeat how important it is to have one number. If you're going to use it multiple times in many different places, you don't want to make a mess and keep typing it all out. You just have one place to set all of that. All right, so 1 plus 6 is 7, 24, 6, 0, and 1. All right, so now it says you answered 2 out of 5 correctly. Perfect. I have 5 questions here, so it should display 5. And time it took you to solve 5 questions is 11.27 seconds. And why it show a whole number and not a integer like last time is because I specifically divide this value by a floating point number and not a whole number. By dividing this by a larger number from an int to a floating point, it will now convert this whole thing to a floating point. So you get a slightly more accurate time or result on how long it took you to solve this. All right. So one last time, let's change this back to 10. All right. And we'll run that. And immediately, the second it displays this question, you should know that the timer has started for us. The current time is being tracked, and then determine how fast you could solve this, right? Bam. All right, and it took me 24 seconds and 24.375 seconds to solve 10 questions. So looks like I answered all of them correctly. 10 questions, 24.375. So that will be it for this exercise.